Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of Zechariah as part of our larger study of the minor prophets. And we are in the middle of talking about the 8 night visions that he has been given, the prophet Zechariah has been given somewhere around February in the year 519. And as we said, these night visions given to the exiles who are rebuilding the walls and the temple of Jerusalem are in their greatest degree a message of hope that God is going to take care of them. He's going to be the wall around them. He's going to be the fire in their midst. He begins by talking about the 4 horsemen being sent out, and they're God's patrolmen to take care of God's people. We've also already seen in this section how specific the messianic prophecies are getting, because we've already been associating a man named Jesus, Yeshua, Joshua, with the Messiah, and we'll see more of that tomorrow. It'll be even more specific tomorrow. And so we want to continue talking about the 8 night visions. Towards the end, the last 4 of these night visions, or at least the last 3 of them, really are about judgment. It begins with 4 horsemen patrolling the earth. It ends with 4 chariots patrolling the earth. Begins and ends with God's forces protecting his people, and then in the end, judging those who don't belong to him and exacting punishment on them. Okay, so the 5th, and in some ways the most enigmatic of all of these night visions, is the lampstand and 2 olive trees, and that's in chapter 4, and it's the entire chapter, but I wanted just to read the first 3 verses. Then the angel who was speaking with me returned and roused me as a man who is wakened from his sleep, and he said to me, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see, and behold, a lampstand all of gold, with its bowl on top of it, and 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts belonging each to the lamps which are on the top of it, and also 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl and one on the other side of the bowl." Already we know where the great source book for the book of Revelation is. It's right here. I mean, almost every one of these images is repeated in the book of Revelation. This piece of apocalyptic is about the coming of the Messiah, mostly, and that is about the fall of Rome and eventually the end of time. But the imagery that John uses, these vivid optical pictures that he's given, they come from what Zechariah has already seen. Lampstands, bowls, the number 7, the angel taking them around, the two trees, 2 witnesses, because the 2 olive trees are 2 witnesses that stand on the earth, the 2 anointed ones who are standing on the earth, verses 13 and 14. Who are the 2? Well, he mentions Zerubbabel by name in verse 7, and he's talking about Zerubbabel, their ruler. Technically, he's a governor, but he's also the figure of their king. He's descended from David. He's in the direct lineage of Jesus. We've talked about Joshua, the high priest, also named Jesus, if that's just the Greek version of his name, being a prefiguring of the Messiah. Zerubbabel is also a prefiguring of the Messiah. So the 2 anointed ones, the king and the priest, who are standing by the Lord over the whole earth, I believe, together symbolize Jesus, who is priest and king. The next of the night visions is the flying scroll. That's pretty straightforward. He sees a scroll flying through the air, and there's a curse on the whole land, the word of the Lord, because of the sin in the world, and the Lord is going to purge everyone who sins. And he mentions specifically theft in these 4 verses. The next is a woman representing iniquity, sitting on top of a huge measuring jar, an ephah, and she's carried back to Jerusalem, and she's a symbol of judgment. But Babylon, a woman representing wickedness, I mean, that's all things that those are all images we encounter in the book of Revelation. And then the last of the night visions are the 4 chariots of divine judgment. He sees 4 chariots, different colors. They traverse the north, south, east, and west, patrolling for God, and they are there to not just to protect God's people, but to defeat God's enemies and the enemies of God's people. So these night visions begin and end with God's servants on patrol, 4 horsemen, and then 4 chariots in chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Well, I took up almost double your time yesterday, so before I reach 6 minutes today, we will adjourn. And tomorrow we're going to talk about the sequel to the night visions that stands in between the night visions and then the questions about fasting. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.